All right. Welcome, everybody, to your game to memorize for, well, probably you're in the 600 to 700 cohort, unless something has changed. Today, I'm going to show you an opening trap from the Queen's Gambit, which has been played a couple times, and it's going to show you a couple interesting tactics around what I call hidden attacks and what some other people sometimes call pins. Okay? I don't know if you've heard that word before, a pin, but first of all, we're going to start with the Queen's Gambit, so let's make sure that we're good up to here. This is the Queen's Gambit, which is not actually a gambit, because white can win back their pawn if they want to, but this opening is called the Queen's Gambit. It's, along with the Ruy Lopez, one of the two most played openings in all of chess history, and the most watched chess opening on Netflix ever. White's goal here with c4 is to pressure black's pawn in the center. We want to eliminate it or sort of distract it from the center, have it come capture us so that we can then, take over the whole center of the board at some point. But in this game, we're going to get a Queen's Gambit declined. So black is going to place the pawn on e6, and the idea here is simply that if white ever captures black's pawn, black recaptures with a pawn, not with a queen, not with a knight, not with their king. Lord, no, not with the king. And this pawn is going to remain a cheap outpost in the center of the board, controlling central space for black. Okay. In this game, white doesn't take right away. But now you're going to see something very, very typical of the Queen's Gambit and a whole bunch of other openings, which is the players are going to start fighting over an important square in the middle of the board, okay? So white's going to add pressure to that key square, right? Knight c3, attacking the same square, also looking to control e4. So if black ever took, white's going to have an even easier time setting up pawns in the center. Okay, so we get knight c3, and white attacks these two central squares with the knight. Black is going to play the simple counter, right? For years and years, this was the move that was played in this position because it counters the same two squares. Then at some point, the move bishop e7 became more popular, and that's because people thought after knight f6 that the move bishop g5 was very strong, and that's what white is going to play in this game. Why is this move so strong? Well, with a move of the bishop that's dark squared, white manages to fight for light squares. What? I'm sorry to blow your 600 rated brains. You were just thinking, David, show me something simple. I know it's going to be too complicated, David. Don't do it to me. And then I just had to tell you that a dark squared bishop can fight for light squares. Oh well, don't worry if you don't get it. It'll percolate in there somewhere. And at some point, you'll get it. So the bishop comes here where it can deal with the knight, which can allow the white knight to win control over these two squares. That could manifest as white being able to play e4, or it could manifest as white even winning the pawn on d5. Because this move seems so strong, it also is opposite the queen, which makes it hard for black to, fix the knight or deal with the bishop. This move was so strong that people were sometimes playing bishop e7 move order instead of knight f6, or even pawn to c6, just super, let me have my d5. You can have the rest of the board, but let me just have d5, okay? Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you're playing black, you sometimes have to be conservative. If your opponent comes after you trying to really purposefully take over the whole board, sometimes you have to make sure you get a little something, but accept it's not as much as what white has. Okay, but in our game, we play knight f6 for black. Old school, classical, orthodox Queen's Gambit declined. A knight for a knight. We match blow for blow. White plays bishop g5, and let me just show you what could happen if black did not defend the d5 square. Let's say we got mad at this bishop and we tried to get rid of it. White could take, and suddenly you'll see that black doesn't have d5 defended enough times. White was attacking it twice there when we took, black defending it only once, and white is now up a pawn. Okay? And go back a move here before we played h6. It looks like black has the pawn defended 3 times to white pressuring it only twice. But you see this bishop creates a lot of pressure, right? It can take the knight, or in some case, it could allow you to take and the knight can't take back because of the queen. This is that hidden attack that maybe we don't even need to take the knight to keep it from taking on d5. Maybe it's enough to just have the threat of taking the queen here. A lot of people call this knight pinned in this position, right? They say the knight can't take because it's pinned. But I just call this a hidden attack because in some case, maybe the knight would move, right? And sack the queen, but for some kind of brilliant something or other, right? It's conceivable. When you say pinned, it kind of seems like the bishop's in charge and the knight's the victim, and I'm not into that. So I prefer to only consider it a full pin if it's the king here and you really can't move the piece. But I think of all of these things more generally as being hidden attacks, which also says the queen's attacking this bishop. And one day you'll learn that there are some tactics in chess where suddenly the opponent moves the knight with some kind of great threat, and then the winning idea is that the queen actually can capture the opponent's bishop. So don't be too sure about your bishop here pinning the opponent's pieces. Your bishop is also undefended at the moment. Look at that. Nobody protecting it. It's an undefended piece, and black's got a hidden attack on it from the queen. So you watch your bishop, because that queen might strike at some point. But if we look here, it seems like white's got 2 pieces pressuring d5, and it seems like black's got 3 defending it. But because the bishop might be preventing the knight from moving, because the bishop might take and even draw the queen away to recapture, this pawn is considered under a lot of pressure here. Now, in this game, black plays knight bd7, hoping to recapture on f6 with the knight if white trades. So now can you see that taking on f6 is very ineffective for white? The point would be to remove the piece that was fighting for these 2 squares. But all we've done is we've brought this piece for black to a great square, and black's defense of d5 remains impeccable. 3 pieces defending d5, right? Still good control over e4 as well. So bishop takes f6. Bishop takes f6, really not effective here, just bringing the knight. And then what black might like to do next, actually, is maybe play h6 and say, hey, give up your bishop and bring my knight here. There are other things black could do, like continuing to develop the bishop or fighting in the center with this pawn somehow, either defensively or counterattackively. So some options for black from here, but knight bd7 seems to have a little bit of a flaw to it, which is it blocks the queen's defense. And in this game, white thought, aha, black has blundered. They didn't see their knight was pinned. I am now going to relieve them of their central pawn. They don't need it. They don't deserve it. It's mine. Ah. And for some chess players, there's no greater feeling in life than winning a pawn that you've been pressuring and eyeing for a while. For other people, it's stuff like sacking your queen or playing a crazy move or getting a checkmate with the pawn. But some people just want to win a little pawn. So white takes on d5. Notice this is the moment that black blocks the queen's defense of d5 with knight bd7. Right? Black's a step away from kind of forcing the tension and bringing this knight to f6. But for a moment, this pawn, how many times is it defended? Once and maybe twice, depending on whether you count this knight, right? And it's attacked twice, and it's defended either once or twice. So white says it's defended once and goes to take it. Black takes back, and white munches it proudly. This game was played at a world junior championship of some kind, like World Under 10, World Under 12, something like that. The players involved later became grandmasters, but at this time, they were little kiddos. White goes hum, eats it, and in this case, it was not black who'd fallen into a trap and lost their center pawn. It was white who fell into a trap. Black simply took the knight, leaving the queen hanging. That's not the queen, there's the queen. Oh my goodness. Well, it's too late for any damage control for white, actually, because black is now up a piece. So it doesn't really matter what white plays anymore, but I'll show you how the game ended. White took the queen, and this was black's counter idea. Check. Now, unfortunately, there are several pieces in the start of the game that can be used to deal with any checks along this diagonal to the king, which is opened up by our very first move, d4, right? There's a number of pieces that can block these checks, and it can be the responsibility of the c-pawn, it can be the responsibility of the bishop, It can be the responsibility of the knight, or as a final resort, the responsibility of the queen. Sometimes when one person is responsible for something, they do a great job of taking care of it. Sometimes when 4 people are responsible for something, they all assume somebody else got it, and they sort of forget that it could even be an issue. Right? So you've got 4 people watching the playground, and they all assume, oh, there's lots of people watching the playground, and they let a kid wander off, you know, and get up to some mischief. Here, white doesn't notice, as one after another, all of the people responsible for blocking this diagonal go off and do other things. Oh, this is a good move, fighting for d5. You know, the knight joins them. Bishop g5 is a powerful move, very powerful, nice pressure. And now white decides, oh yeah, let's cash in. We've got too much pressure. Black miscalculated. They didn't see they were pinned. Boys, not pinned. That's a hidden attack. Takes. Whoops. Takes. 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 Check. And suddenly, oh, no c-pawn, no knight, no bishop. Everybody's gone. The queen has to give herself back. In the game, white resigned here. You don't need to remember any further than this, but just for completeness and for your understanding, let me show you that black would be able to take the queen and then capture the bishop on d8 as well. If you count up the pieces that remain, black is ahead by a knight at this point. Right? So black would have an extra piece in the endgame. Of course, you don't need to resign if you're down a piece in the endgame. You can play out that endgame. You know, make white prove it. But certainly this opening is a bad start for white, right? To go straight into an endgame down an entire knight is not a propitious way to get the campaign going. So this is considered an opening trap, a blunder for white. Do not take this pawn on d5 as Bobrov once did as a kid, or you will find yourself down a piece in the end game. All right, do you remember this game? Let's go through it once more to make sure you got it. You'll have to go through it more times on your own, but it starts with the Queen's Gambit declined, right? Let's get rid of some of that stuff. Queen's Gambit declined. Now they fight over d5, right? White puts pressure, black defends. White puts more pressure. Black sneakily tries to bring this knight here, seemingly hanging the d5 pawn for one moment. White says, meow, 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 meow. Cookie Monsters it, right? Pawns, bits of pawns flying all over the place. And what's the refutation, folks? That gets us to white grabbing a pawn, right? So it goes Queen's Gambit declined, pressure on d5, pieces coming out fighting over the d5 square. White thinks they see an opportunity to win the pawn because they think this knight is pinned. Black takes it. White takes the queen. Check, winning the queen back. And black is up a piece. All right? Got it? Got it? Good. Now, play over the game a couple more times for yourself. Check it. Check back in a week if you still remember it. Show it to somebody else. Go find some other, newer chess player and show them this cool opening trap. Explain to them, if you can, like what's the fight over d5 or what's a hidden attack versus a pin. And that'll help solidify it for you yourself. All right. Take care, everybody. See you next time.